When God speaks to us, his voice does not clamor for attention. It does not raise its volume in order to be heard over the noise of the world. Rather, it is a quiet, yet unshakable presence, a voice that does not force itself upon us, but one that calls us with an undeniable clarity. It is always filled with purpose, not just for the moment, but for our very journey in life. It does not come from a place of personal desire or emotional turmoil, but from a place of peace and eternal wisdom. Our own thoughts are subject to our fleeting emotions and desires. They ebb and flow, often shaped by the day's events, our moods, and the countless distractions of modern life. One moment we might think of something with great conviction, and the next we might question its validity altogether. Our thoughts can be driven by fear, pride, or self-interest. In this way, they often pull us in different directions, offering no clear path or steady direction. The nature of our thoughts is inherently restless. It's important to note that while our thoughts may arise in a state of confusion or conflict, the voice of God remains distinct in its calmness and clarity. When we hear God's voice, it doesn't demand our attention, but it commands our respect. It does not compete with the noise of the world, but instead offers a quiet, steady assurance. This divine voice doesn't simply aim to instruct us in a moment, but seeks to align us with a deeper truth, one that resonates within the very fabric of who we are. God's voice is fundamentally different from our own thoughts, as it carries a unique quality of clarity and authority that transcends the tumult of daily life. When we speak of God's voice, we do not refer to a mere auditory sound, as we experience in our human conversations, but to a deep, resonant sense of divine communication that is often felt more than heard. It is a voice that seems to speak directly to the heart, bypassing the noise of the external world and the internal clutter of our minds. This voice is not loud or demanding, but is marked by an unmistakable peace and tranquility, one that centers and calms the soul even in the most chaotic circumstances. Unlike our personal thoughts, which can often be filled with confusion, emotion, or self-interest, God's voice brings a sense of serene confidence that aligns with a higher purpose and a deeper truth. The clarity of God's voice is remarkable. When we encounter it, there is no mistaking it. It is not something that we need to question or dissect endlessly, as we might do with our own thoughts. When we hear God's voice, we are assured of its authenticity and purpose. There is a profound sense of certainty that accompanies it, like a beacon of light that cuts through the fog of doubt. It may not always come in the form of detailed instructions or explanations, but it always presents a clear sense of direction. Whether it manifests as a simple thought, an impression, or a feeling, it stands apart from the confusion of our own mental noise. The clarity in God's voice brings a sense of understanding and insight that is not of our own making, but is rather a gift of divine revelation. God's voice is not influenced by external circumstances in the way our thoughts often are. Human thoughts are reactive, shaped by the events of the day, our immediate desires, or the emotional undercurrent of our environment. Our thoughts can be driven by fear, insecurity, ambition, or frustration. They can be erratic, sometimes even contradictory, influenced by our moods or the state of the world around us. The voice of God, however, remains steadfast and unchanging. It is not swayed by momentary fluctuations or external pressures. When God speaks, his words are not clouded by the whims of the present moment, but are grounded in timeless truth. This is why God's voice often brings such a sense of peace. It is not tossed about by the winds of emotion or circumstance. It is rooted in something eternal and unshakable. One of the key aspects of God's voice is its purity and its focus on truth. Unlike human thoughts, which are frequently colored by personal biases, insecurities, or desires, God's voice speaks with absolute integrity. It does not seek to manipulate, persuade, or control. Rather, it points us toward a higher understanding of reality, one that transcends our immediate concerns and opens us to a more profound view of life, love, and existence. This voice does not seek to flatter us or make us feel comfortable in our current state, but it calls us to rise above our limitations, to transcend our selfish desires, and to move toward a life of greater integrity, compassion, and understanding. It is a voice that aligns us with moral good, and although it may sometimes challenge us, it always does so in a way that encourages growth, not harm. The voice of God is always purposeful. It never speaks without a reason, and it never comes without a call to action. When God speaks, there is always a direction that comes with it, a nudge toward a particular decision, a lesson to be learned, or a path to be followed. Unlike human thoughts, which can often be meandering or aimless, God's voice directs us with a sense of profound clarity. It may ask us to step out in faith, to trust in something we cannot yet see, or to do something that seems difficult or uncomfortable, but it always provides the assurance that there is a greater good in mind. The purpose of God's voice is not to serve our own ambitions or desires, but to align us with a greater divine plan, one that often transcends our immediate understanding. Another important characteristic of God's voice is its consistency. While our thoughts are fleeting, shifting from one subject to the next, God's voice remains steady. It does not bombard us with conflicting ideas or offer distractions that pull us away from the truth. The consistency of God's voice helps to distinguish it from the erratic nature of human thought. When God speaks, he is unchanging, and his messages are consistent with the divine nature rooted in love, truth, and righteousness. This consistency builds trust and provides a firm foundation, enabling us to move forward with confidence and assurance. God's voice is never demanding or coercive. While human thoughts can sometimes push us into actions out of anxiety, guilt, or fear, God's voice comes with a gentle urging, inviting us into a deeper relationship with him and with others. It speaks with an authority that is not heavy-handed, but persuasive in its calm, quiet strength. It respects our free will, never forcing us to listen, but always presenting the invitation to align ourselves with divine wisdom. There is an undeniable peace that accompanies this voice, and it calls us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and of the world around us. Unlike our own thoughts, which may often feel like the pressure of 1,000 demands, God's voice offers freedom, guidance, and a profound sense of security in the path it lays before us. Human thoughts are deeply rooted in our personal experiences, desires, emotions, and the ever-changing circumstances of our lives. Unlike the stillness and clarity that marks God's voice, our thoughts are often characterized by fluctuation and inconsistency. They can be unpredictable, swinging between various moods and reactions depending on our immediate environment, past experiences, or mental state. One moment, a thought may be filled with optimism, and the next, it could shift to doubt or anxiety. This instability arises from the inherent nature of human thought, which is constantly influenced by both internal and external factors. Our thoughts are rarely static, they are in a constant state of flux, making it challenging to find clarity or certainty in them. The root of this instability lies in the emotional undercurrent that drives much of our thinking. Human thoughts are often filtered through the lens of our emotions, such as fear, joy, sadness, or anger. When we experience a strong emotional reaction, our thoughts tend to mirror that feeling, amplifying our emotional state. For example, when we are anxious, our thoughts can spiral, often jumping from one worry to another, each thought reinforcing the anxiety. Similarly, when we are joyful, our thoughts can be optimistic and expansive, but they may quickly lose their grounding if faced with an unexpected challenge or change. This emotional influence makes it difficult to trust our thoughts as stable or objective sources of guidance. The thoughts we experience in moments of distress or elation can often lead us astray, driven more by emotion than by reason or truth. Human thoughts are heavily influenced by our desires and personal biases. We may not always recognize it, but our thoughts are often shaped by what we want or what we fear. If we desire something strongly, our thoughts may work overtime to justify or rationalize that desire, even if it goes against our better judgment or moral compass. Similarly, if we fear a particular outcome, our thoughts may obsess over that fear, amplifying it and distorting our perception of reality. This tendency to mold our thoughts to fit our desires and fears creates a narrow perspective, one that may lead to self-deception or confusion. Unlike God's voice, which aligns with objective truth and wisdom, our thoughts can become entangled with our personal preferences, limiting our ability to see the bigger picture. This bias also manifests in the form of habitual thinking. Over time, we develop patterns of thought based on our past experiences, cultural influences, and the opinions of others. These thought patterns, though often unconscious, can have a powerful hold on us, making it difficult to think outside of them. For instance, if someone has experienced failure in the past, they may be more likely to think in terms of defeat and limitation, regardless of the current circumstances. Our thoughts, in this sense, can become confined by the walls of our past, preventing us from seeing new possibilities or approaching situations with fresh perspective. This tendency to recycle old thoughts and beliefs can create a mental echo chamber that reinforces our fears, prejudices, and assumptions. To the emotional and biased nature of human thoughts, there is also the constant barrage of external stimuli that shapes our thinking. In today's world, we are bombarded with information, opinions, and distractions from all directions: social media, news outlets, conversations with others, and even the environment we inhabit. These external sources can overwhelm minds, making it difficult to focus or think deeply about any one subject. Our thoughts often shift rapidly from one topic to another, driven by whatever catches our attention at any given moment. This fragmentation of attention means that our thoughts rarely have the time or space to develop fully or to reflect deeply on any particular issue. We are continually distracted by the noise of modern life, making it harder to achieve the stillness needed to discern any deeper truths. Another characteristic of human thought is its tendency towards self-centeredness. Our thoughts often revolve around ourselves, our concerns, our needs, and our desires. Even when we think about others, our thoughts are often filtered through how those people relate to us, rather than seeing them as they truly are. This self-centered nature of our thinking can limit our empathy, as we struggle to view situations from the perspectives of others. It can also distort our understanding of the world, as we interpret events through the lens of how they affect us personally, rather than how they might contribute to a larger, more objective truth. This inward focus of thought makes it difficult to think selflessly or to consider the needs of others in a pure and compassionate way. Human thoughts are often driven by a lack of resolution or closure. We may find ourselves thinking about a problem or situation without reaching a clear solution or understanding. This can be especially true when we are facing decisions or dilemmas. Our thoughts may loop back on themselves, considering every possible outcome, weighing pros and cons, and yet failing to arrive at a firm conclusion. This constant mental cycling can lead to indecision, frustration, or paralysis, as we are unable to escape the maze of conflicting thoughts. The unresolved nature of human thinking can be disorienting, as it often lacks the finality or peace that comes with clarity or certainty. Human thoughts are often tainted by the weight of the past. Our memories, both good and bad, shape the way we think and perceive the world. Traumatic experiences, past failures, or unresolved emotional wounds can cast long shadows over our thoughts, affecting how we view ourselves and others. Even positive memories can shape our expectations in ways that limit our ability to embrace new experiences or adapt to change. These past experiences, when not processed or healed, can cling to our thoughts, distorting our perception of reality and keeping us trapped in a cycle of regret, resentment, or nostalgia. The distinction between God's voice and our thoughts becomes most apparent in the quality of clarity that accompanies the divine voice. While human thoughts are often muddled and conflicting, God's voice stands out for its sharpness and directness, bringing with it a sense of undeniable truth and purpose. When God speaks, there is no ambiguity, no second guessing or uncertainty. It is a voice that does not require interpretation, for its meaning is immediately understood on a deep, intuitive level. Unlike the constant shifting and churning of our inner dialogue, God's voice is distinct in its absolute clarity, which serves to guide us with an unwavering sense of direction. One of the key elements of this clarity is that it cuts through the confusion that often clouds our minds. Human thoughts are frequently influenced by a combination of factors: our emotions, personal biases, desires, and even external pressures. These factors often result in conflicting thoughts that pull us in different directions. In contrast, when we hear God's voice, there is a profound sense of peace that accompanies the message. It doesn't introduce new complications or uncertainties, rather, it brings clarity and resolution to the confusion we may be experiencing. This clarity can often feel like a moment of profound insight, where what once seemed unclear or muddled suddenly becomes crystal clear. It is as if the layers of distraction and distortion are peeled away, revealing a truth that we can recognize and trust. This clarity is not just about a lack of confusion, however. It also speaks to the depth and richness of the message itself. God's voice does not need to explain everything in exhaustive detail, nor does it need to overwhelm us with complexity. Rather, it offers a truth that resonates with the very core of our being, one that makes sense even when we cannot fully grasp all of its implications. The clarity of God's voice often brings an immediate sense of understanding that surpasses our rational thought. We may not always comprehend everything about the situation at hand, but we will know with certainty what step to take next. There is a depth to this clarity that transcends intellectual knowledge, touching on something far more profound and spiritual. Another aspect of this clarity is that God's voice is not influenced by the noise or distractions that typically flood our minds. Human thoughts, as previously discussed, are often reactive, shaped by our emotional states, external pressures, and a constant barrage of information. Our thoughts can be fragmented and scattered, jumping from one subject to another, never fully focused on a single issue. God's voice, on the other hand, remains steadfast and focused. It does not compete with the endless stream of thoughts that pass through our minds, nor does it try to drown out the noise. Instead, it stands in stark contrast to the chaos, remaining calm and composed. In this sense, God's voice acts as a steady anchor amidst the tumult of our thoughts, providing a clear direction even when everything around us feels uncertain. One of the most telling features of God's voice is its consistency. Unlike the unpredictable nature of our own thoughts, which can fluctuate wildly depending on our mood, desires, or external influences, God's voice remains consistent and unchanging. This consistency builds trust, as we come to rely on the steadiness of God's guidance. When we hear God's voice, we can be confident that it will not waver or lead us astray. It does not change based on circumstances or whims, but remains grounded in a higher truth that transcends time and space. This consistency not only provides us with a sense of security, but it also reinforces the reliability of God's guidance, offering us a foundation on which we can confidently stand. God's voice also possesses an unmistakable quality of authority. It does not need to demand attention or try to convince us of its validity, rather, it simply is. When God speaks, we feel a deep, instinctive recognition that this voice is one that carries weight and significance. There is no hesitation, no uncertainty about whether this is the right path. The clarity of God's voice comes with a quiet, yet unshakable, authority that compels us to listen and act. Unlike the voice of our thoughts, which can often be self-serving or shaped by our personal biases, God's voice is always authoritative, offering guidance that is rooted in truth and goodness. This authority is not coercive, but rather one that invites us to follow with trust and humility. The clarity of God's voice is inherently aligned with peace. Human thoughts, especially those driven by anxiety or fear, can often feel chaotic and unsettling. They may race from one worry to another, leaving us feeling uncertain and overwhelmed. In contrast, God's voice brings a profound sense of calm. It is a peace that surpasses understanding, a sense that even in the midst of turmoil, there is a deeper truth to hold on to. When God speaks, there is a sense of resolve and tranquility that accompanies the message, making it clear that the path forward, though possibly challenging, is the right one to take. This inner peace is one of the clearest indicators that we are hearing God's voice, for it transcends the confusion and restlessness that often mark our thoughts. This sense of clarity is not just intellectual or emotional, it is also spiritual. God's voice reaches beyond the limits of our mental faculties and taps into the deepest recesses of our soul. When we hear God's voice, we recognize it as something that connects to a higher reality, one that aligns with a greater purpose and transcends the transient concerns of daily life. It is a voice that brings us back to our spiritual center, helping us to realign with our higher calling. This spiritual clarity does not promise to answer every question or solve every problem, but it provides us with the peace of mind that, in the grander scheme of things, we are on the right path. It allows us to trust that God's plan is unfolding as it should, even if we cannot fully see the next step or understand the bigger picture. The clarity of God's voice is marked by its sharpness, its consistency, its authority, and the peace that accompanies it. Unlike our thoughts, which are often influenced by emotional turmoil, personal bias, or external distractions, God's voice remains distinct, unwavering, and clear. It brings a sense of resolution to the confusion we may feel, offering guidance that is not only understandable, but also aligned with a higher truth. This clarity provides the foundation upon which we can build our lives, offering both direction and peace in the midst of uncertainty. God's voice stands in stark contrast to our human thoughts because it is always rooted in purity and truth. When we compare the voice of God with the nature of our own thoughts, we quickly notice a fundamental difference in the motivation and integrity behind each. Human thoughts are often clouded by personal desires, biases, insecurities, and emotions. These influences can lead to a distorted view of the world, where our perceptions are not entirely grounded in objective truth. For instance, when we are fearful, our thoughts may exaggerate dangers or possibilities, causing us to make decisions based on fear rather than reality. Similarly, when we are motivated by selfish desires, our thoughts can become self-serving, focused on personal gain rather than the well-being of others. In contrast, God's voice is entirely pure, free from these distortions. It does not seek to manipulate or control, but always points us toward what is just, right, and good. One of the distinguishing characteristics of God's voice is its absolute alignment with truth. While human thoughts are often subject to our limited understanding and imperfect perception of the world, God's voice speaks from a place of infinite wisdom. It offers insights that are not tainted by human error or the fleeting nature of our emotions. The truth that accompanies God's voice is unchanging, eternal, and incorruptible. When God speaks, we know that what he is saying is in alignment with the ultimate reality, a reality that we may not always see in full, but can trust nonetheless. This trust is vital because, unlike human thoughts, which may need constant revision or re-evaluation, God's voice offers a permanent foundation in truth that does not shift with time or circumstance. Another aspect of the purity of God's voice is its intrinsic nature of love. Human thoughts can often be self-centered or focused on fulfilling personal wants, and while they may occasionally be motivated by a sense of care or affection for others, they are often also tinged by self-interest. For example, we may think about helping others, but often our motivation is intertwined with how it might reflect on us or the benefits we might gain. This blend of altruism and selfishness can complicate our thoughts and lead to actions that are not entirely pure or aligned with the highest good. God's voice, however, speaks purely from a place of love for all creation, for every individual, and for the world as a whole. It is an unconditional love that does not seek to gain anything but only desires the good of others. When God speaks, his voice conveys not only guidance but also compassion, patience, and mercy. It calls us to act with kindness, forgiveness, and understanding regardless of our own emotional or selfish tendencies. God's voice is also free from manipulation or coercion. Human thoughts can often be driven by external pressures or internal desires to achieve specific outcomes. We may find ourselves thinking in ways that seek to manipulate situations or people to fit our desires.